Ladies and gentlemen, today we'll be talking about something super controversial. It's Battlefield 5. Because apparently games have become outlets for people to express their political opinions, irrespective of so-called quote-unquote political sides. Don't worry though, I won't bore you with the whole SJW Patrick pre-order debate nonsense. There are 100 other clickbaited videos on that. I am generally quite sick of hearing about this. I'm not going to express my opinion because I simply don't give a shit at this point. So without further ado, let's start talking about something that actually matters to the game. And that something is the attrition system. To begin with, we should establish what the developers intend on doing with the so-called attrition system. It's important when starting a discussion to always know what we are talking about. If we go to the Battlefield website, we can find details on what the developers intend to do with the so-called attrition system. They also refer to it as scarcity and war of attrition, but let's just call it attrition for now. Attack a point, take damage, heal, rinse, repeat. In previous Battlefield games, your strategies were often quite similar from attack to attack. Full health regeneration and a high availability of ammo are two reasons for this. In Battlefield 5, we're adding a layer of scarcity of health and ammo. This will create new challenges when you approach new situations and more player choice. Now this is the introductory paragraph of the description on battlefield.com, which I will leave a link to in the description below. Let's dissect this a bit. Firstly, attack a point, take damage, heal, rinse and repeat. This is referring to previous Battlefield games after Back Capital, where health was fully regenerative and ammo was not really that scarce. In fact, it's a bit more scarcer in Battlefield 1 since we don't have any ammo upgrades. And we do have to seek out support from time to time. Firstly, let's speak about the impact of having scarcer ammo, in particular scarcer gadgets. In the game's second alpha, the max ammo count on the primary weapons was increased by 1 magazine, which made a world of difference and indeed did not really compromise my ability to engage multiple targets or in an extended firefight. In fact, if there's something I really like about the attrition system is that when I was playing on Conquest, there seemed to be a greater sense of direction simply because I have to look for ammo and health in the absence of competent teammates. In previous games, if I don't have any competent teammates, I'm pretty much screwed. This is of course speaking exclusively about ammunition. I have not yet started to cover the impact of having non-regenerative health or partial regenerative health, which is actually the case. Now in the game's second and first alpha, regenerating health for some reason regenerated up to the odd number of 49, so you could basically get half your health points back. With this number, I really did not see much of an impact from, let's say, I'm at very low hit points and someone will kill me very quickly, simply because the value is quite high and it's not that annoying. Furthermore, if I'm searching for ammo, which I always am, I will come across a health point station anyway, so it's not a big deal. That being said, I don't really believe that non-regenerative health is very important to creating the aforementioned loop intended by the developers. The developers intend to reduce the spawn die mentality, which I am not sure if it's 100% a thing with good players. I mean, I would imagine that quote-unquote average or bad players will actually be doing the same thing in Battlefield 5 because they're not being attentive. Perhaps it can achieve a happy medium where an average player will actually think about going for ammo packs, and as a result there will be a higher presence of people on the flag. Now a concern of this is that people will just camp the ammo or hit point crates. Judging by the alpha, I don't think this is a realistic concern because the ammo and HP crates, on that map at least, were all in exposed areas, so if you hang out there, you're pretty much dead because there is no cover other than hit point and ammo crate itself. And this also creates a situation where you'll be a sitting duck because everyone will expect that someone will be camping near the ammo and hit point crate. This is actually similar to a game I used to play back in the day called Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, where we had ammo and hit point crates and we always knew that there's someone going to be there, so we were always prepared. Let's talk about some upsides to this system. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, it lent Conquest a bit more flow than usual. Personally, I tend to avoid Conquest because there is no clear front line, and it's a more sandbox experience, which is, I guess, what people picture of Battlefield at first, but it's actually not something I would have for common consumption, if you could put it that way. I much prefer something with more structure like Rush, Frontlines, and if it didn't have 64 players, Operations. I am not a fan of large player counts. I think they're a spectacle over a gameplay. But that's the point. That's not the point of this video. So yes, Attrition does add some flow to Conquest. But where does this flow come from, you might ask? Well, the flow comes from integrating a sort of mini quest in your gameplay where you're always looking for ammo and hit points, because you know you're not reliant on teammates to do this, and you know where they are. You simply learn where the ammo and hit point crates are and tactically choose when to retreat to an objective. If used correctly, this has the interesting side effect of making flags even more worthwhile to defend, not because people are actively seeking to defend it, but because they're seeking a common resource, a resource important to survival. You could say the same thing for limited health regen, but in all honesty, this just creates a more frustrating situation because we don't really need it. You're still getting people to go on the objectives if you're limiting their ammo supply, especially explosives. I don't think it's due to the limited ammo per se, it's the idea that, hey, I can resupply my ammo without relying on people. I know where the ammo and health spawns are, so let's retreat to those whenever we get the chance. A smart player would definitely think this way. A oddly similar comparison I can draw to this is actually Quake 3. I haven't played much of Quake 3, but I did play enough to know that that game is all about resource management first and foremost. Obviously it's not as extreme as Quake 3 in the sense that you need to look for armor, you need to look for hit points all the time, you need to look for different weapons. But you always need to keep in mind a resupply mentality, or more accurately, a retreat resupply mentality, where taking on a horde of enemies without resupplying is not the best of idea. Of course, if you're playing in a squad, this is not actually that important, and the game will feel pretty similar to previous entries. Assume that in previous entries I actually played actively with a squad. Now the negative implications of Attrition, at least specific to the, well, I guess this applies also to hit points in a way. So yeah, the negative implications of Attrition. Judging by the close Alpha Operations gameplay, there are situations where as non-squad oriented player, that is to mean someone who is a bit, I guess you could call lone wolfing it, has to resort to resupplying in open areas. That said, the additional magazine and over higher ammo reserve to levels similar to BF1 seen in the second Alpha in the game have reduced this effect by a considerable margin, because you simply now have enough ammo to deal with a considerable amount of enemies. You can also resupply some ammo from fallen enemies. Now the counter argument to all of this, and it is a reasonable argument, but there are flaws in it, is that, well, DICE's intention is that they want more teamwork, they want a higher reliance on teamwork. This is all awesome on paper, but in reality this really harkens back to the early days of Battlefield 1942 and 2 and other team games in general, such as Wolfenstein Enemy Territory. People playing online aren't generally in constant contact with one another, especially if they are simply randoms to one another. It is just not the case that someone will be coaxed into playing well with a team that they don't know, they're not communicating with. Yes, it is true that Refractor Engine games Battlefield required quote-unquote more reliance on teamwork, but this also created a lot of frustrations to the point where actually I did not enjoy Battlefield 1942 and Battlefield 2 multiplayer very much, simply because you simply did not get much teamwork from your average player. Yes, you could play on private community servers, well, not private, privately hosted servers where there's generally a more intimate community where they actually play together, but this is still up to debate because you still don't have any control on who's playing on the server, unless you're running a server, a password protected server that favors only a particular clan, but I'm pretty sure those are and were in the minority. The goal of modern game development is not to dumb down a game or not to make it super accessible at the cost of complexity, but rather to make it enjoyable without resorting to the aforementioned situations where you have to play with a squad, you have to play with on a particular server because randoms will not give you ammo or not give you hit points. It's just not a good idea, and it's not even a realistic idea to expect that a 64-player game will entail a number of players that will actually participate in teamwork, a significant number at that. There are simply too many players and as such too many variables to this. Not everyone is interested in playing the game as it is meant to be played. We already have problems with this in Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, etc, etc. You're not going to improve it by simply adding ammo and hit point rates at the idea that you need to rely on teamworks if you don't want to rely on these mechanics. It's simply not realistic for a random player to interact with another player in an almost military style communicatory fashion. It simply does not happen on a frequent enough basis to warrant an enjoyable first-person shooter experience. I mean, you could disagree with this all you want, it's not an objective truth by any means. It's actually a situational one, and one that is based on a modicum of anecdotes. I did not play Battlefield 2 for an extensive period of time, but I did play around 40 hours late in its life, like 2009 or something, when I actually could afford the game. And I had this feeling where I did not feel empowered at all. I did not have the ability to influence the game per se, especially if I'm playing on 64 players. Which, by the way, the Refractor Engine game in Battlefield actually scaled the map. You could actually have a 16-player conquest map, no problem. Ultimately, I just want Battlefield to remain the game where you could have an enjoyable experience on your own without relying on people, but when you're actually playing with a squad. That feeling of squad play and interaction is almost second to none. I don't want a realistic shooter. I can understand people who want Battlefield to be a more team-reliant shooter, but not a more realistic one. I believe Battle Nonsense's video actually speaks of this very specifically, and I can understand his argument, I genuinely do. But it leaves behind this problem I mentioned earlier. You just cannot have a fully enjoyable first-person shooter experience on your own. You have to rely on teammates, always, at all times. Otherwise, you're just going to have a frustrating experience. Even from my own experience, I don't play Conquest 64 or Operation 64 because often I feel powerless because people are generally not playing well. There are usually 4 or 5 people dominating the the scoreboard just because they're using light tanks or bombers or attack planes, and people are powerless to stop it because they don't coordinate well. I mean, the alternative is to create some system where people are forced to coordinate, but I don't see that being very practical or actually fun for that matter. I just want Battlefield to remain the way it is. Honestly, the way Battlefield 1 is for the most part. I think that game struck a great balance between teamwork and relying on teamwork. They removed the idea of Rambo do-it-all classes like the Ace-23 AK medic do everything to kill anything in sight except for vehicles, but there are many maps which did not feature vehicles in Battlefield 4, so there's a great imbalance there. In Battlefield 1, ammo is scarce enough to warrant being resupplied, especially if you're playing Assault, where you will use quite a bit of ammunition and you need to close the distance, so you can't afford to run out of ammo. Medics are a bit less so, because I think they have a better kills per shot than your average Assault. My point is, I don't think we need to force teamwork. We need to integrate teamwork in a way that is approachable for most people, but also fun for the competitive, well, not competitive, competitive entails something else entirely. Just people who want to learn the game and get good with it, not necessarily compete in 5v5 domination or what have you. That's a different story altogether. The beauty of games that can be accessible but are hard to learn and hard to master is something that is common in games that are still popular to this day, like Age of Empires 2 HD, which is a very simple game to learn but very hard to master. Of course, we still need to keep our focus on the teamwork element in Battlefield 5, where it is being, I guess, forced upon us, and to compensate for that, we have a higher number of self-sufficient ammo and hit point stations. I don't think we need limited regeneration in particular, though I do like the ammo scarcity. That is what I'm getting at. Just get rid of the limited health regen, but retain the ammo scarcity. I mean, a big problem that Battlefield 2 have, for example, is that many people just play the medic because you could self-heal. Simple as that. If you could self-heal in an environment where health is limited, well, that's an automatic advantage, and many older games actually suffer from this. Another example would be Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, where the only really infantry killing class was the medic, and most people took medic. That is not good game design. It is actually balanced poorly for infantry combat, and actually destroys the longevity of the game, in my opinion, because there is much less variety and reason to use anything else. Granted, BF5 has limited health regen, not no health regen like Battlefield 2, which would be absolutely awful, I might add, for the reason I just mentioned, but I still envision Medic to be overly popular in Battlefield 5 if limited health regen is to remain, especially since they have access to semi-auto and SMGs. I don't want the return of a Battlefield 3-4 style medic meta, but for alternate reasons. So to sum up, I quite like Attrition overall. I like the idea that it integrates a gameplay, an additional gameplay loop over your existing gameplay loop where you have to look for ammo and health. That said, I don't enjoy the limited health regen system because I don't think it adds anything interesting to the game, which couldn't be achieved by limited ammo, which is already the case. Furthermore, there are some negatives. There are concerns that it won't translate well to all game modes, particularly linear game modes like Frontlines. It works well on Conquest, it doesn't work all that well on Operations, but I think that's more of an issue of map design rather than the inherent game mode itself. Well, it's inherent to the linear nature of the game mode, but a good map design can actually alleviate this. So that's pretty much all I had to say on the Attrition system based on the second alpha. We will need to see how it works in the open beta to get a better representation of how it will work on the final game. I am not one to judge a game just on itself or just looking at stuff. I'll leave the YouTube comments for that, or people who are just upset about everything. So that's all I had to say about Attrition system. Thank you very much for watching. I've been your host Danminigun, and I'll see you in Battlefield 5 hopefully.
Besoin d'un médecin par ici. Mitrailleuse, tirez-vous.
Man, I got killed by dynamite. Like that's so many times today. Nice.
Where the fuck is the rest of the team? I've run out.